Well, hello and welcome everyone to yet another one of my The Flash videos. Barry is Savitar, or is it Savitar is Barry? Congratulations anyway to everyone who happened to have capitalized on that, in terms of bets of course. I know for one I should have, totally didn't, but I should have. I would have probably been rich by now. However, it doesn't really matter who was right and who was wrong here. Every guess is a good guess there, considering we were all theorizing. There was this whole thing about certainty that was going on about him being Eddie in some cases, Cisco in a very few ones, Julian Albert in others, and finally Ronnie Raymond in a lot, especially given Caitlin's reaction at the end of the 19th episode when Savitar revealed himself to her. There's never any kind of certainty when it comes to things we don't know. No conviction is in the hands of the writers. We were only making either wild guesses or semi-informed guesses. For one, I was so convinced it was Eddie Thawne until I had to go back and check a few episodes in general and scenes in specific since the season started, review my notes in Savitar, which I've been keeping every time some event led to a possible clue about who he happens to be, and that's when it all kind of added up, leading to my personal guest video about his identity, in which I mentioned the option that made most sense to me happened to be Barry Allen. Now, there are many theories out there about how Barry ended up being Savitar, including the time remnant theory, which seems to be more of the prevailing theory. It has already existed prior to us actually getting the reveal that Savitar is Barry. I'll be discussing that one in a moment, but I'll start with one of the more relevant theories in my opinion, which happens to be all about Flashpoint Barry, or another alternate timeline version of Barry. Now, we know Savitar existed prior to Barry creating the Flashpoint timeline. He existed in the original timeline, or at least he claims to have been, but it's all cause and effect. After all, Savitar happens to be a future version of Barry, so his creation might be directly correlated to the creation of Flashpoint. Alright, let me explain what I'm thinking here in terms of a timeline. So there is the original timeline. Eobard Thawne travels back in time, kills Barry's mother, takes over the face of Harrison Wells, builds the particle accelerator, makes an honest Flash out of Barry, ends up being revealed as the Reverse Flash, Eddie shoots himself, Eobard gets erased from the timeline, the singularity opens up, there is fake Jay Garrick, Zoom, the death of Henry Allen, Zoom being defeated, Barry traveling back in time, supposedly creating Flashpoint, allegedly erasing Flashpoint as he realizes he's done a grave mistake, and a future version of Barry Allen becomes Savitar. That is some sort of a chronological order of events. Now, a lot of people asked me back when I posted my Who's Savitar videos how I thought the Flashpoint theory would work, and I didn't want to discuss it much back then in order not to sound insane with my theory, especially if Barry doesn't end up being Savitar. Now, in order for the Flashpoint theory to work, we have to consider the possibility that every timeline, including the Flashpoint timeline, does exist regardless of whether Barry has been there or not. That would actually mean that in the very same manner that there are alternate universes in the multiverse, there could be alternate realities within the same universe. What would that mean for Flashpoint though? Well, it would mean that Barry never actually created Flashpoint, that as a timeline it already existed all along, with some version of Barry living with his parents who never died, one at the hands of the Reverse Flash and the other at the hands of Zoom. That would be a version of Barry with no powers in a reality where the big superhero happens to be Kid Flash. Now, such alternate realities could exist in some sort of a split manner, like it all starts as one reality, then a decision is being made. Take the Reverse Flash traveling back in time to kill Barry's mother. If he made this decision, that's one reality. If he didn't make it, that's another reality. That would also mean that our Barry was placed in the most suitable timeline based on his decision to save his mother at the end of the second season of the show. That could also indicate that the original timeline still exists out there, moving in a parallel manner with both Flashpoint and this new timeline we believe was created with the reversal of Flashpoint. Now, this is only a theory about how all these alternate timelines or realities could exist altogether and at the same time. Feel free to go wild with other theories or to completely deny it. But based on this theory, the original timeline Barry would have ended up replacing another Barry, that being the Flashpoint version, sending him to wherever, maybe switching places with him and sending him to the original timeline to take his place. Now, this is kind of confusing, but in this case, this original Flashpoint version would have ended up with two dead parents on his hands, a relationship that he might not have known about or cared for with Iris, leading to his willingness and ability to kill her with ease. After all, when you think about it, even the worst of villains usually find it extremely difficult to harm that one person they care about the most, so it's kind of difficult to believe any version of Barry who actually loved Iris one day would ever harm her in that manner. In kind of a similar manner, a future version of Flashpoint Barry, who would later on gain his powers like he was getting them for the first time, ended up somehow becoming some sort of an Eobard Thawne, erased from the timeline by Barry's erasing of Flashpoint, but still existing in a manner and on the run from the Black Flash, possibly ending up trapped in the Speed Force. This could also apply to the original timeline Barry. Now this theory does not really require the existence of alternate timelines and is much simpler to explain on the show, considering they have limited time with only 3 episodes to go for the season. Simply put, some version out there that was maybe traveling through time ended up not so alive but still existed in the manner that the Reverse Flash did post Eddie shooting himself. Possibly, as I mentioned moments ago, ended up imprisoned in the Speed Force and had to deal with the consequences of a younger Barry's decision, going crazy over it and deciding to work against his younger self, making him pay for his mistakes in messing up the timeline. Now another theory based on versions of Barry from other timelines happened to be about the original timeline Barry, like the original timeline Barry. And I can't claim I even thought of this one. A friend of mine actually mentioned he read it somewhere, and it basically constitutes the ultimate theory. He was discussing with me how Savitar is Barry from the original timeline. Not the show's original timeline, but like the ultimate original timeline. So if you remember in the first season finale, Eobard Thawne tells Barry the reason he traveled back in time was to kill him as a child, wipe him from existence, and prevent him from ever becoming the Flash. He does make it clear that killing Barry's mother was not originally the objective. There is another timeline in which this tragedy never happened. That would be the original timeline Eobard Thawne came from in the first place. Now when Thawne couldn't go back to his time, he decided to create the Flash in 2014, and that would be like 6 to 7 years earlier to when he actually became the Flash in the original timeline. Now in events of that original timeline, yes, I'm calling it that from now on, his parents are alive. Harrison Wells never got killed by Thawne and continued to work on the particle accelerator until it exploded in an actual accident rather than on purpose, and only then Barry ended up with his powers. So all these alternate timeline possibilities or theories could get their viability from Savitar mentioning down the road that only one of them could live, which possibly means one of these theories with the multiple timelines happens to be true, and with the creation of one of all these new timelines, an older future version from an erased timeline got trapped in the Speed Force because only one version could exist, or that he just made the statement in more of a metaphorical sense, given he can be these two completely different people, both good and evil. In the words of Madame Gao from the first season of Daredevil, man cannot be both savior and oppressor, light and shadow, one has to be sacrificed for the other. Now I'm not necessarily saying any of these multiple timeline theories definitely holds true, but it could possibly be one of them, and it would make perfect sense if that were to be the case with an original timeline Barry or a Flashpoint Barry. If you remember at the end of the second season when Barry ended up saving his mother, it seemed like other versions of him were getting erased from the timeline. I'm not sure that's the case, but it's possible. Now these two versions I just mentioned in specific should have no attachments to Iris, or at least are not supposed to. They happen to be two versions that grew up with his parents still alive, not raised by Joe West, never close to Iris enough to fall in love with her, thus willing to kill the one woman the show's Barry ever loved, without remorse and without thinking twice. Now the only major drawback to this theory is it wouldn't explain how Savitar managed to retain all these memories of Barry's if he were to be a completely different version of Barry. Then again, he could have been observing from within the Speed Force, or it could be just one of those many plot holes this season has been suffering from, which I'll discuss in a future video. So we've also got the time remnant from the second season theory, where some fans believe this time remnant came back to hunt Barry for having him sacrifice himself and end up dead. This theory is kind of extremely flawed in my opinion, and for so many reasons. For starters, the time remnant is dead and gone, but then again, some might explain him going into flames as he tried to stop Zoom's weapon of mass destruction as some sort of transformation, moving into the Speed Force, getting trapped in it, becoming Savitar over time, managing to escape, and coming back to hunt Barry Allen. The time remnant has been explained as one of many future versions of Barry, a concept that supports my very own theory about multiple realities existing at the very same time. There is also another very important issue when it comes to this theory. The time remnant agreed to help Barry stop Zoom. He was not forced into any of it, but instead did it all on his own volition. Now another theory out there that could explain why Barry Allen is seeking revenge on his very own self is similar to the comic book arc with future Barry Allen, in which he feels the need to go back in time and kill his own self in order to undo all the harm he has done over time, and especially to those closest to him. Savitar is clearly traumatized, both psychologically and physically, so a chance does exist that it is all because of his past self and his addiction to the Speed Force in a manner of speaking. A very interesting theory as well happens to be about the darkness within Barry Allen's heart. Metaphorically, of course, we're not watching Once Upon a Time here. Barry has been crossing a lot of lines here with his time manipulation, and since the very first season of the show. What if his future self crossed more lines not necessarily of the same kind? Whoever came up with this theory attributes it to the fact that at some point Barry contemplated killing Grodd, revealing that Barry could slowly have lost his way in the future, blurring the lines between good and evil, between right and wrong, landing himself on the villainous side of things. Now the final theory on the subject happens to be all about the Iris death scenario, possibly with Iris, but not necessarily with her. I think this one is kind of possible, but it's like too easy to guess. Think about it here for a moment though. How many times could you watch loved ones die at the hands of your enemies before you actually give up and give in to the idea that you're not only the cause of it, but you're also the only one losing? Possibly an endless number of times, but that is a slim chance, because the chances here are there are only so many times you can bear it before you actually lose it and snap, and this is exactly what I'm thinking could have happened in this situation. But then, as I said, it's a very easy to guess theory. I don't think that is the case. Now with regards to the scarring on Savitar's face, there is the simple straightforward theory, which I'm more inclined to believe in at the moment, the explanation handed to us on the episode of the reveal, and the very same reason he built the suit of Savitar. So basically it's all about too much speed, his body not being able to take it or handle it, getting this big ass burn on his face before he realized he needed the suit to protect himself from the adverse effects of said speed. The time remnant theory, on the other hand, would suggest these burns are the result of him going into flames on the second season of the show as he tried to stop Zoom's grand plan. There's another theory out there that states the scars are a product of a fight or struggle with either a time wraith or the Black Flash, which in my opinion happens to be pretty possible if we do apply the whole theory about him being from an erased timeline, which when I kind of think about it now, in a manner makes him a time remnant, just not the one from the second season of the show. But with that being said, I'll be uploading another video on my Flash Season 3 finale theories pretty soon, theories based on leaked footage of said finale. You can also check my video on the most recent episode of Arrow and my opinion on it being good or bad and whether or not it ruined the season, as some fans do claim. So let me know in the comments what you think of all these theories, which one do you happen to prefer, or if you have one of your own. Let me know as well who you think might end up dead on the season finale, and if you think Caitlin happens to be redeemable at the moment. And remember, it would be much appreciated if you drop me a like if you like the content of this video, and if you subscribe if you want to see more videos on The Flash on What the Geek. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you soon.